Hi, I'm Stefania with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and we're here in Hamilton for the 2018 National Conference on Ending Homelessness. I'm here with Leilani Farha, Special UN Rapporteur for Adequate Housing. Leilani, I wanted to start with a big question, focusing on Canadian homelessness, because I know you study it globally. But what can you say about what our housing situation right now is doing to our most vulnerable population and why it's so important to do something about it?
I quite like that question because you're asking sort of what do the conditions of homelessness mean for people, and I think we don't think about that enough. You know, when we walk over a person who's homeless and living on the streets, we don't really ask, oh, where is that person going to the bathroom? How is that person taking a shower? How does that person have any privacy ever? How does that person engage in a relationship? You know, we don't ask those questions, but if you start asking those questions, you start seeing really we ask of people living on the streets or who are living in homelessness, we ask of them to live a life really without any dignity. And that's a problem because what makes us human and what binds us all together as humans is our dignity.
Absolutely. And I'm just wondering, you know, when we hear right to housing, because there's this big campaign that you're a part of to, you know, enshrine the right to housing in legislation, particularly here in Canada. So do you want to maybe expand on that for people who might hear that term and it sounds kind of vague to them? Yeah.
Well, let me tell you what it doesn't mean, because a lot of people think, oh, the right to housing, well, that's ridiculous and that's unfair because then anyone can just ask the government for a house. Well, that is not what the right to adequate housing means. First of all, the right itself means the right to live somewhere in peace with security and dignity. So that's the broad definition. So it's way more than just four walls and a roof, of course. What's required of governments is not that they provide a house for everyone, but rather that they create the conditions such that over time people can access adequate housing. It's that simple. And it's a progressive thing. So no one expects a government, bam, overnight, to be able to solve all the housing problems that they've created. We do expect them to be taking continual and continuous steps quickly. They can't just like put their feet up and, you know, rest. No, they have to be constantly taking steps. There are some situations that require governments to do something immediately, and homelessness is one of them because it's such an egregious violation of so many human rights, not just the right to housing, but you can imagine the right to health, for example, the right to security of the person, the right to life itself. And so there's an immediacy and an urgency that is imposed on states. Well, it's supposed to be imposed on states around homelessness.
And, you know, right to housing sounds like such a high-level issue because we're really going after government. So what are some things that everyday people or frontline workers, people with lived experience, everyone can do? Like, what kind of steps do you suggest to help make that shift and get that movement towards right to housing?
Yeah, I think the first thing we have to do is we have to undo our complacency. We have to unravel it, untie it, and I think we have to find our inner outrage. I think we have to stop accepting the unacceptable. We've come to such a strange place now. How is it that we can walk on a street and walk over someone or walk by someone and not look them in the eye because they have no money to live? Well, how have we come to that place? I want us to undo that. I want us to look at a person living in homelessness totally differently than the way we do now. Even those of us in the sector who, you know, are doing the right thing by people living in homelessness. I want us to start looking at a person who's in homelessness and say to ourselves, that person is there as a result of the commodification of housing and as a result of the failure of governments to implement the right to housing. That's a totally different mindset. So that's one thing. That's a big thing. That's one thing. I think people can do small things too, though, you know? Like, if you look at this commodification of housing, as I call it, or financialization. That's where you treat housing as an investment rather than housing as home, a place to raise families, a place to grow memories, to have safety and security, you know. So you view it as a commodity. I'm going to make money off of this parcel of land. Well, one thing that people can start doing just in their everyday lives, next time you go to book a vacation and you're looking, oh, hotels are so expensive, oh, I think I'll look for Airbnb. Ask yourself if Airbnb is regulated in the city that you're visiting. Because if it's not regulated, what it probably means is that Airbnb units are taking up stock that could be housing stock that's affordable for people who actually live in the city. So just think twice.
Absolutely. And maybe a thought that you want to leave us on, one key message that you would like people to take away when they think of right to housing and Canadian homelessness.
I think a key thing is, you know, we live in this country, Canada. Many people are very proud to live here. One of the things about Canada, besides the fact that it's an incredibly stable democracy, is that we have a very healthy economy. We have the 10th largest GDP in the world and have had for many, many years now. We have the fastest growing economy of the G7 nations. Why do we have so much homelessness? 235,000 at least people living in homelessness. It is absolutely outrageous, and it's shameful. And I want people to start understanding that that we are all actors in this, and we can all make a difference. And we have to simply say, it's not cool, it's not acceptable for a country with as much wealth as Canada to have this continuing on and on and on with no solutions.
And I think one of my favorite things that you said was find your outrage.
Yeah, people have to find their outrage. I really sometimes think, why are we not all walking around pulling out our hair, screaming in the streets, this is outrageous? Why are we not? I mean, why are we willing to accept that that governments would allow people to live lives that lack dignity, that governments would not care that someone doesn't have a place to go to the toilet? Not the world I want to live in. I'm going to find my outrage all over again.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. The Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness is part of a national campaign called Right to Housing. So if you want to let your MP know that you care about them enshrining this into legislation, go to cah.ca, and we've got the links ready for you there. Thank you so much for joining us.